Rồi. Rồi xin chào các bạn. Chào mừng các bạn đã quay trở lại với sự kiện chia sẻ kiến thức về phúc lợi động vật. Thì sau Tết rồi thì đầu tiên là mình xin chúc các bạn là một năm mới vui vẻ, an khang, sức khỏe thì là dồi dào. Và để quay trở lại với cái buổi chia sẻ ngày hôm nay thì mình xin giới thiệu lại, đây là một cái chương trình chia sẻ kiến thức về phúc lợi động vật được tổ chức bởi Phòng Phúc lợi Động vật thuộc Tổ chức Động vật Châu Á. Thì hôm nay chúng ta sẽ quay trở lại với một cái chủ đề mới, đó là về khả năng nhận cảm xúc và nhận thức của động vật. Thì trước kia thì cái khả năng này thì thường được coi như là chỉ có riêng ở con người thôi, nhưng mà sau nhiều những cái nghiên cứu về hành vi thì chúng ta cũng đã dần chứng minh được rằng đây không chỉ là có riêng ở con người mà có rất là nhiều những loài động vật, kể cả ở bậc cao lẫn bậc thấp, đều có những cái biểu hiện về về việc có cảm xúc cũng như là có nhận thức của riêng mình. Thế nên là hôm nay chúng ta sẽ cùng tìm hiểu xem là những cái chứng minh về những cái hành vi đấy ở động vật là như thế nào. Và diễn giả của chúng ta ngày hôm nay một lần nữa là quay trở lại, đó là anh Dave, là giám đốc của Phòng Phúc lợi Động vật thuộc Tổ chức Động vật Châu Á. Thì chúng ta sẽ có một cái phần giao lưu với diễn giả ở cuối chương trình. Thế nên là nếu như các bạn có câu hỏi gì thì các bạn có thể để lại trong phần hộp chat, cũng như là hay là đợi đến phần Q&A và chúng ta sẽ có những cái câu hỏi và trao đổi trực tiếp với vị diễn giả của chúng ta ngày hôm nay nhé. Và bây giờ thì mình sẽ chia sẻ màn hình video ngày hôm nay nha. Cái buổi chia sẻ này thì bọn mình sẽ phát video, thế nên là nếu như có các bạn xem có bị giật thì các bạn có thể xem trên livestream trên YouTube nhé. Mình sẽ gửi link YouTube ở đây.
Hello, I'm Dave Neale, Animal Welfare Director for Animals Asia Foundation, and I'm here today as part of our Onelife presentation series to talk to you all about animal emotions and animal cognition. Animals are conscious in the sense that they can experience sensations and emotions. They have the ability to suffer both physically through pain, but also mentally through things such as fear and stress. And research is now demonstrating that animals have many of the emotional and cognitive and moral capabilities that we previously thought belonged solely to us. And these are the topics that we're going to be exploring a little bit more within this presentation. So essentially, animals' lives are way more complex than we've ever really given them credit for. And we're finding this out now through all this behavioral research. So things such as social groupings, being with other members of your species, but not just being with, but actually forming relationships and friendships with other individuals within your social group are incredibly important, just like they are in our society. And being able to communicate with other members of your species and being able to communicate your emotions with other members of your species is incredibly important to animals. And animals are showing emotions which are similar to empathy and ways of behaving that are being interpreted as morality. And again, this is all being shown through this behavioral research that animals are way more complex in both emotionally and cognitively than in previous years we'd given them the credit for. And of course, this is not just animals such as wild, charismatic animals like dolphins and elephants and chimpanzees. These are all animals. And so, you know, once we start seeing the emotional and the cognitive capabilities in animals of which we're treating very poorly, then this has major implications for the future of the ways that we treat these animals, such as the animals that we intensively farm. So let's look at some of these capabilities then. Firstly, we'll just take a look at empathy. Empathy is this ability to be able to feel the emotional state of another. So to be able to understand what another person is feeling, whether that's a happy state or a sad state or a fearful state, but then actually be able to feel that state yourself. And we do that ourselves, and it's very well documented in some of the more charismatic species, such as the great apes. But what we are seeing now is that it's actually common across many animals. And this particular case, it's been documented in rats. Now, rats are a very social animal, and they form very strong bonds with individuals that they spend time with. And so two rats, which are very, very much bonded together, will be able to feel empathy for each other. And this was actually demonstrated through behavioral research, with one rat being put into a plastic container which it couldn't get out of, and another rat actually working to free that rat from that container, even when there wasn't any particular major benefit to that rat. And I'm going to show a video which firstly will talk about empathy and altruism within the great apes, but then we'll also demonstrate this behavioral research in which demonstrated empathy in rats.
One day, when he got a call from his student Susie Katwenda in the Congo, saying she thought bonobos, a type of great ape, might actually share.
I was like, oh, come on, Susie, there's no way. And she was really insistent, so I said, okay, well, let's do an experiment.
So Hare and Katwenda set up a special situation for two bonobos. One, the stranger, was locked in a room with a key that could be turned only from the other side. The other, in this case Saki, was free to wander around. Then Katwenda places a pile of fruit pieces outside the locked room. Saki has a choice. She can eat all the food herself, or open the door to release the strange bonobo she's never met, and possibly give up some of her food.
Think about it. You see somebody at the table next to you with no food. Are you going to go up to the person that you don't know and say, hey, would you like to eat half of the food I just ordered? You know, how many times have any of us done that?
Will Saki open the door for the stranger and share the food?
It's the closest thing that you could think of to doing charity in animals.
So humans might not be the only ones capable of kindness to strangers. But what was Saki thinking? Did she feel sorry for the other bonobo? Was she feeling empathy?
I can't really tell that. All I can tell you is that Saki didn't have to do that. Saki could have just eaten the food. It may be that bonobos just really enjoy eating together. It may not be empathy in this case.
You know what the word
Empathy. It's considered a uniquely human trait, explained here in the classic funny face.
Is it something like sympathy?
Oh, it goes beyond sympathy. Sympathy is to understand what someone feels. Empathy is to project your imagination so you actually feel what the other person is feeling.
And to demonstrate that uniquely human trait, I've come here to Times Square to test it out for myself on the world's toughest crowd. My kindly producers have shut me into a plexiglass box that can be unlocked only from the outside. I'm totally helpless. Will my fellow human beings sense my distress and help me out? Sure enough, after a few weird looks, my species comes through.
Thank you so much.
Over and over again. Would an animal ever do this? The answer might come from the last creature you'd think to ask. Rats. At the University of Chicago, neuroscientist Peggy Mason is about to show me that empathy might not be just for humans.
Are you going to be empathic today?
Yeah. To test her idea, she's built a special predicament for 2 rats. One is trapped inside a plexiglass tube with a door that can be opened only from the outside. The other is free to run around, and he's never been taught how to open that door.
So you think that Free Rat is literally trying to set free Trapped Rat out of pure human concern?
Or rat concern, as the case may be.
Unbelievable. Look at that! He's trying to figure it out! What the heck? Oh my gosh!
And when they see their pal struggling, they certainly seem to work pretty darn hard to get their buddy out.
He is pulling him out.
Come on! He's like, and for now crying out loud, I got you out, now bust out of here!
Mason has run hundreds of rats through these setups, and she's convinced it's the strongest experimental evidence to date of animal empathy.
So it's the first experiment where there's an action that is motivated by empathy. They're using empathic concern to actually help the other rat.
So just how much do these rats really care? Mason wanted to find out. So she did a second experiment to give these rats a moral dilemma.
What we did was we put 2 restrainers in the arena, and in one restrainer was the cage mate, and in the other restrainer was 5 chocolate chips. And these are rats that were eating, on average, 7 chocolate chips in a sitting. So 5 chocolate chips, no problem.
What will the free rat do? Will he hog all the chocolate to himself? Free the friend?
So in theory, we've given Free Rat a choice.
That's right.
He can either let his pal out of the tube or go get a nice tasty snack. Checking out his pal. Oh, come on! He let the guy out first! Incredible. And whoever gets there first is gonna gobble it all up.
Will they? Or will they share?
They're not smart enough to share their rats!
They're nice. They share. So on average, the free guy only eats 3.5 chocolates. There's 5 chocolates, so he's leaving 1.5 chocolates.
I might have to think twice the next time I want to call someone a rat. But one day,
as well as in rats, then behavioural research has also now demonstrated empathy in some of the animals which are farmed, such as in hens and in pigs, particularly empathy towards their chicks and their piglets. And anecdotally, without actually having the scientific research, then there has been documentation of empathy in the fishes as well. One particular case of these 2 fish which lived in an outdoor pond, and their owner once came home to find one of them had was out on the grass and potentially been picked up by a bird and dropped, was still alive, and he put it back into the water, and was unfortunately the damage that it had caused being out of the water meant that it had problems swimming to the surface of the water. So every time he fed the fish, the other fish would swim down to the bottom, go underneath the fish and push him to the top to allow him to feed. And again, not scientific, but good evidence that there's a helping mechanism there, that there is something, an area of concern by the individual fish for his friend to ensure that he can feed. So empathy being shown in many species. And following on from empathy, then we look towards things such as consolation. And consolation refers to providing psychological comfort after an incident, a stressful incident or a traumatic incident has occurred. And this is seen in a number of species, particularly in elephants, and this has been studied and it's talked about in this short clip.
Why are these elephants running? Are they happy? Are they frolicking? Or are they running away in fear from another elephant that's bitten one of them? If you were an elephant, you'd know that they are very distressed. And researchers say you'd probably rush over to console them. Until now, only a few kinds of non-human animals have been known to console each other when a fellow has been attacked. apes, wolves, and some kinds of birds, although there are lots of anecdotes about dolphins and other cetaceans. The researchers figured that elephants, who are highly intelligent and social, would also try to cheer each other up. So they studied 26 elephants in 6 groups in a park in Thailand. The scientific definition of consolation requires that it come after an attack, and the researchers didn't always know what disturbed the elephants. Sometimes it might have been people or dogs or a noise, but otherwise the elephant behavior fit the bill. Elephant bystanders gathered round the distressed animal, they made chirping sounds, and they touched each other in ways that the researchers say are reassuring to elephants. Evidence of empathy in yet one more animal.
And this leads us to altruism and the development of moral behaviours we talked about at the start of this presentation. And altruism describes this selfless practice of concern for another individual when there may not be any immediate benefit to yourself, but actually being concerned, showing concern for an individual and their situation. And this is the basis of moral behavior within societies. And we see this in many societies which are highly social, in that for them to operate, then there has to be some element of moral behavior and some element of moral rules so that individuals follow those rules and to allow the society to actually operate efficiently. And this is really best explained by Professor Frans de Waal, who studied this for many, many years in this video.
People sometimes describe nature as a dog-eat-dog world. Some of the biologists depicting nature as a battlefield, basically where selfish tendencies tend to prevail. And for morality, the evolution of morality, there's very little room. What they mean is that all they see is competition. I win, you lose, winning is better than losing, and so on. That's totally wrong. I've fought against that sort of characterization of animal society all my life, because just like human society, it is built on a lot of friendship and cooperation at the same time. We like to deny that connection that exists between us and animals. Certain tendencies, such as a sense of fairness, empathy, caring for others, helping others, following rules, punishing individuals who don't follow the rules, all of these tendencies can be observed in other primates, and I think these are the ingredients that we use to build a moral society. The whole spectrum of both very positive behavior and very negative behavior can be seen in other animals. Animals can be heroic and they can be genuinely altruistic, and we actually tested in our chimpanzees. We've done an experiment where a chimpanzee can choose between 2 options. One option rewards only himself, the other option rewards himself plus a partner who sits next to him. And our chimpanzees prefer the latter option. They prefer a task where they can reward their partner at the same time as themselves. The primates are a very cooperative society in general. The reason they live in groups is that on their own they cannot survive. So they have to have companions from whom they get support, with whom they live together, who help them find food, who warn them against predators. And they have long-term friendships in that society, just like humans have. There's a lot of studies on how animals do favors for each other. And if you think about how this works, it has to be based on gratitude. Like, you do something for me and I do something back to you. There must be some sort of emotional mechanism in there. And there's descriptions in the wild of people who, for example, who cut loose a whale who has been caught in a net, and they describe how the whale doesn't just swim away. The whale goes back to all these people and nuzzles them or lifts them up out of the water, and then he disappears, and they feel the whale is expressing his gratitude for whatever happened. So there's all sorts of signs that animals have that capacity. In the 70s, I discovered that chimpanzees reconcile after fights. Many animals have this process where a relationship is disturbed by fighting, but the relationship is still valuable to you, and so you need to do something about what happened to it. When I saw in the chimpanzees that they sometimes kiss and embrace each other after fights, and later in bonobos I saw that they have sex after fights, I immediately understood that reconciliation is common. And then later, of course, many other studies have found reconciliation not just in the primates, in elephants, in dolphins, in wolves, in goats. And adoption is also typical. So, for example, in Thai forest, in Ivory Coast, there is a documentation of 10 cases of adoption by males, adult males, who have adopted an orphan chimpanzee. So the chimpanzee loses its mother. Chimpanzees are dependent on their mother for at least 8 years of their life. So if you lose your mother at 3 years of age, you may be able to survive on solid food, but you still need to be carried and protected, and someone needs to explain to you what to eat and what not to eat. And adult males are willing to do that, so they spend an enormous amount of time and energy into individuals that they don't get much back from. And I find that very interesting cases. These cases of altruism that don't fit any evolutionary scenario, but nevertheless occur. And so we look at pro-social tendencies and helping behavior, and animals can be truly altruistic, and I'm convinced of that. But animals can also, of course, be very mean to each other. Chimpanzees, for example, they are known in the field sometimes to kill their neighbors, because chimpanzees are very hostile and very xenophobic. If they see strangers, they have very different reactions than when they see their familiar members. For example, familiar group members, they have empathic reactions, and we can test that in particular ways, but the strangers, they certainly don't have that. So chimpanzees are a very good model of tribal humans, so to speak. But we have an equally close relative, which is the bonobo, exactly as close to us as the chimp. And bonobos, when the groups meet in the wild, instead of killing each other the way chimpanzees will do, they mingle, they have sex, they groom each other. It looks more like a picnic than warfare between them. The bonobo has been called xenophilic, meaning is actually attracted to strangers and has positive contacts with them. In my work, I sometimes contrast anthropomorphism with anthropodenial. Anthropomorphism is when we put, let's say, too much human characteristic into an animal, and that's of course not good. But anthropodenial is also not good, where we sort of deny the connection that we have with animals and the fact that we are animals. I look at humans basically as primates. 95% of what we do are primate tendencies and primate emotions and primate sociality. And there is a certain part that is uniquely human, obviously. For example, I'm talking here to a TV screen, which is pretty unique, I would say, but still I'm communicating, I'm making facial expressions and gestures, I'm communicating with an audience, which is a very primate thing to do. And so we have this very interesting combination of our cultural and technical achievements with our old primate heritage, but I always look more at the primate heritage than anything else. People sometimes...
And we have another example of this fairness and moral behavior, in this case in capuchin monkeys, and this is a case of in food sharing. And often animals are cooperating for many parts of their life, and some of that is to obtain food. In this particular case, then the food is very difficult to obtain, and two individuals may need to cooperate with each other, which then leads to one individual actually getting the spoils, getting the food. And so the fairness comes in when they will share that food with the individual that they've cooperated with to be able to access the food. And this is shown in this video of capuchin monkeys in a behavioral research situation.
A pot of hazelnuts and the flint that's needed to open the lid. You need both to get a nut, but they're separated by a see-through barrier. Vulcan has the rock, but can't reach the nuts. Virgil has the nuts, but knows he can't eat them without a rock. Vulcan quickly offers the tool. He must hope Virgil is smart enough to open the lid and fair enough to cut him in on the spoils. Virgil is struggling. he doesn't have his friend's skill. And Vulcan is getting impatient. The flint is finally through the lid, but can Virgil be trusted to share the nuts? With Vulcan out of reach, it must be tempting to take the lot. Fair share. Vulcan and Virgil have used teamwork to beat the system. But can Capacities...
And as well as seeing this in primates, then now we're beginning to see it in many other species as well. In this particular case, we see cooperative behavior in cleaner wrasse. Now, cleaner wrasse is a fish species which sets up these cleaning stations, and other fish come to them and they get the dead skin and the parasites cleaned by the cleaner wrasse. And they often operate as a team. So two cleaner wrasse will clean one particular fish. Now, sometimes one of those cleaner wrasse may take a little nibble out of the flesh of the fish, and if they do that, the fish is likely to leave. And this is breaking that moral code, those rules which the fish have developed for their cooperative society. And what will happen then is, because they've taken a bite and the fish has left, then obviously both the fish or other fish which were cleaning that fish lose out, and so then they will reprimand the fish which took that action, and that's seen in this video.
These are the beauty salons of the reef, and they're often run by a pair of wrasse, small fish with a stripe running from head to tail. These committed cleaners regularly tend to a host of different creatures. They provide a vital service, removing the dead skin and parasites from outside and even inside their clients' bodies. It may seem like a thankless task, but the cleaner fish are getting a good meal out of it. And of all their clients, the manta rays are their star customers. The manta rays surrender themselves completely. Within seconds, a host of fish rush to their side. Each fish tends to a very specific part of the manta's body, and the cleaning can last a full hour. For the most part, the service is second to none, but occasionally the cleaners can get a little carried away. A female wrasse has taken a nibble out of the manta ray's flesh. She's broken the rules, and there's a price to pay. Her partner chases after her. It's the cleaner fish equivalent of a stern telling off. If the bite is a one-off, the manta ray will return. But research has shown that if it happens too often, the pair risks driving regular visitors away. Fortunately, it seems her indiscretion hasn't put their client off. The manta is back, and business has resumed.
And moral behavior is also evident and very important when it comes to animals playing. So animals playing, obviously experiencing these positive emotions of joy and happiness, and being happy to play with each other. And we see this often in young animals, but also in adult animals as well. And play, although it seems very simple, it does actually have a moral code to it. It's often you've got an individual that maybe is stronger than another individual, and if they were to play with using all of their strength, then they may actually harm that other individual. If they were to do that, then the play would stop, because the individual which was being harmed wouldn't continue to play, wouldn't be enjoying it anymore, and would therefore move away from the situation which is enjoyable. And so it means that if you are if you're the stronger individual, then you are likely to have to change your behavior to suit the other person that you're playing with. And we see this within our own society, of course, as we're playing with our children, or our children are playing with each other, that they adapt their behavior to meet the same situation, the same level as the person that they're playing with. So there's a moral code within the animal kingdom for when individuals are playing. Now, there's some of the happy emotions, but we also see the negative emotions in animals as well. In particular, things like depression, which we know that people experience, particularly after traumatic events or chronic stress situations. And we see this in animals as well, animals which are kept in very poor conditions over a long period of time, particularly go into this state of this mental state of depression, but also animals which have experienced a trauma, in particular elephants, young elephants, which have seen maybe their family members being killed in the wild, will often then go into some kind of sort of post-traumatic stress situation, which is obviously going to be detrimental to their mental and their physical health. But we also see it in some of our farmed animals as well. In this particular case, this is a young cow which has been removed from its mother, part of the dairy industry, removing it from its mother so that we can extract the milk for people to drink. But this cow has also had its horns removed. It's been gone through this painful dehorning process. So it's feeling the physical pain, but often these individuals will feel a mental state which is similar to a depressive state that we know of. And of course, individuals also show grief, which we're well aware of. When a family member or somebody close to us passes away, then we experience this period of grief and sorrow, where we change our behavior and our outlook on life. We also see this in the animal kingdom as well. And this is a situation here where a chimpanzee within a community has died, and the other chimpanzees will come together and inspect the body and show similar behaviors to what we do, in that it's very calm situation. There's very little sort of excitement and happiness around at that point, as they're beginning to process that something has changed within their society. And we see that in other animals as well. In this particular case here within killer whales, the orcas, and this particular case of the orcas in captivity, which is a big problem with keeping these individuals in captivity, which has a number of problems on their welfare. And this was expressed very well through the making of the Blackfish film, in terms of just the response of mother killer whales when they have their youngsters taken away from them. And here's a film just to demonstrate this.
Baby Shamu. I know it was naive of me, but I thought that it was our responsibility to do as much as we could to keep their family units together, since we knew that in the wild that's what happens.
Yes, sir, that's our baby.
Kalina was the first baby Shamu.
Baby Shamu, SeaWorld's newest star.
She had become quite disruptive and challenging her mom a little bit and disrupting some shows and that kind of thing.
She's got the whole place jumping, Shamu. She's our baby whale.
It was decided by the higher-ups that she would be moved to another park when she was just 4.5 years old. And that was news to us as trainers that were working with her. To me, it had never crossed my mind that they might be moving the baby from her mom. The supervisors basically was kind of mocking me, like, oh, you're saying poor Kalina? You know, what's she going to do without her mommy? And, you know, and that, of course, just shut me up. So the night of the move, we had to deploy the nets to separate them and get Kalina, the baby, into the med pool. And Katina was generally a quiet whale. She was not overly vocal whale. After Kalina was removed from the scene and put on the truck and taken to the airport, and Katina, her mom, was left in the pool, she stayed in the corner of the pool, like literally just shaking and screaming, screeching, crying, like I'd never seen her do anything like that. And the other females in the pool, maybe once or twice during the night, they'd come out and check on her, and she'd screech and cry, and they would just run back. There was nothing that you could call that, watching it, besides grief.
Those are not your whales. You know, you love them, and you think, I'm the one that touches them, feeds them, keeps them alive, gives them the care that they need. They're not your whales. They own them. Kasaka and Takara were very close. Kasaka was the mother, Takara is the calf. Takara was special to me. They were inseparable. When they separated Kasaka and Takara, it was to take Takara to Florida. Once Takara had already been stretchered out of the pool, put on the truck, driven to the airport, Kasaka continued to make vocals that had never been heard before. They brought in the senior research scientist to analyze the vocals. They were long-range vocals. She was trying something that no one had even heard before, looking for Takara. That's heartbreaking. How can anyone look at that and think that that is morally acceptable? It's not. It is not okay.
And of course, this grief or this expression of sorrow is also seen in other animals as well. And in particular, as we talked about earlier, in cows, who have their youngsters, their babies removed from them within the dairy industry, so that we can remove their milk. And this short video just shows that expression of sorrow that the mother cow feels when that calf has been removed.
מאמי, את מתגעגעת לעגל שלך?
And that's something we see not only in cows, but also in sheep that have their youngsters removed from them as well. Moving away then from the emotions, both the positive and the negative emotions, as we've just shown, then animals also have exceptional cognitive abilities as well. So this is the ability to take in information, to process that information and to retain that information and to restore that information, to bring it back to the forefront, to be able to use it and to be able to use it for benefit, to be able to do things like problem solving. So in this case, then we look at, and many animals have these problem solving abilities. And one of the species which has been looked at quite extensively is the crow family, and how they have found ways of using tools and solving particular problems. And this can be shown in this video of a crow which has solved a problem which involves 8 different stages, which they have to carry out in a particular order to be able to find a food reward.
The meat is positioned so deep in the narrow box, it's out of reach of the crow's beak. But Alex has positioned a number of other objects nearby. The question is, can 007 use the tools available to solve the puzzle?
Imagine that you're a crow. Here's your food in a deep hole. How would you go about, with the tools available to you on this table, solving this problem?
The bird's toolkit includes a short stick hanging on a piece of string, 3 stones inside wooden cages, and a longer stick trapped in a plastic box. First, the crow must use the short stick to get the stones, and then use all 3 stones to get the long stick.
And now the crows can take this and probe it into the hole and roll, much better than I can, the food out of the hole and get themselves a nice tasty reward.
It's a complicated task. The crow is familiar with the individual pieces of the puzzle. He's done each of them separately for a food reward. But this is the first time he's seen them arranged like this. 8 separate stages that must be completed in a particular order if the puzzle is to be solved. If the bird succeeds, it'll be a world first. He takes time to have a look. And then starts with the short stick. He finds it too short to reach the food. He then sets off to get the first stone. Got it. But he doesn't seem to know what to do with it. And another. He appears to be stuck. But now something seems to click. He dispatches the first stone. Then returns to collect the last one. Got it. The final stage. Success. 8 individual stages complete. The crow performed all 8 tasks in the correct order.
And as with our examples of emotions, then also we see these problem-solving abilities in the farmed animals as well, in the hens and the pigs and the cows and sheep that we farm. And here is a short video demonstrating that.
Pig ignorant. Dumb as an ox. Silly cow. Bird brain. But as you will see, these labels no longer fit what we now know about animals.
That's okay, you're doing good.
Pigs can use computer joysticks.
Oh, good boy, that was good.
Hens can learn from watching TV. But we allow these animals to be treated in ways that we wouldn't dream of treating our pets. The nearest most of us come to farm animals is in the supermarket, where we buy their meat, milk and eggs. But do we know how intelligent and sensitive they are, the conditions they're reared in, and how the decisions we make every day directly affect their lives? Recent scientific research has discovered that farm animals are far from stupid. This hen has spent her whole life living in a small cage. Despite a life in a cage, this hen has learned how to navigate this obstacle course to get to a nest box. Driven by her instincts, she has to use her intelligence. The computer won't open the door until she pecks 3 times. Her instincts tell her she's about to start a family, and she should find a suitable place to build a nest. In this feeding experiment, the hen has learned from watching television in which bowl to find food. Even when offered a yellow bowl, she goes for the red one, as seen on TV.
Omelette, get to work. Omelette.
It's not only birds. This is Hamlet. He's amazed animal psychologists by learning a computer game designed for chimpanzees. Hamlet has to move the cursor into the blue area around the screen. When he does, he gets a sweet. The scientists make it progressively harder for Hamlet, yet he succeeds every time. Can other animals do this? Here's Lex, a Jack Russell dog. Lex is willing, but even after a year, he hasn't quite got it and needs help. Hamlet can do it without help, and can learn to distinguish between different shapes. This and other experiments have shown that pigs are at least as, if not more, intelligent than dogs.
Almost there.
But how does Hamlet compare to chimpanzees?
These pigs have made the connection between joystick operation and these simple side tasks even faster than most chimpanzees and much faster than some chimpanzees.
So you can see there, so good cognitive abilities within some of the animals that unfortunately we're still treating very, very badly. But these problem-solving abilities aren't just seen in the vertebrates. Now we're beginning to look for them and see them in invertebrates as well, and in particular here within bees. And these bees were set a task of obtaining a food reward where they had to actually carry out a task and use something to be able to obtain that. And this video shows that not only could they complete that task, but then they could pass on that skill to others. So others would socially learn how to complete that task, and then that would be passed through the generations. So evidence of these advanced cognitive abilities in invertebrates, and this is a particularly interesting area of study where we're now beginning to find many, many more examples of cognitive abilities within the invertebrates, which we previously wouldn't have thought have existed. Looking at a different capacity, memory capacities, is the ability to obtain information and then to memorize that information and knowing that you're going to use it again in future. This is something which is seen in a range of animals. Again, see, part of this talk, we've concentrated a little bit on these abilities within the farmed animals. If you look at cows, then cows have used their memory ability. They live within social herds. They need to memorize the relationships that they have with other cows within that herd, both good and bad. So they've had a bad relationship or a bad incident with an individual. They need to remember that so that they stay away from that individual, and then they'll stay together with the individuals that they've bonded with. If they live in extensive environments, they may need to remember where they can access resources as well. And also cows are very good at self-medicating. So if there are plants within that environment, then they can remember that those plants have actually helped them. So if they're feeling, for some reason, maybe they're not feeling too well, then they may eat a certain plant that makes them feel a little bit better, and they will remember that and go back to that plant in the future. And these memory capacities, and in particular this very advanced memory capacity, this short-term memory capacity, has been demonstrated in the chimpanzees. And these are chimpanzees in a research laboratory in Japan, which have demonstrated this incredible ability to obtain information in a short period of time. And we have a video to demonstrate this.
Professor Tetsuro Matsuzawa at the Kyoto Primate Research Institute in Japan has devised a memory test for the chimpanzees. His star pupil is a 7-year-old chimpanzee. Show him the numbers 1 to 9 and he'll put them in the right order, pointing to them one by one. Every time he gets it right, he receives a treat, a tiny piece of apple or half a raisin. But now, the researchers make things difficult. As soon as the chimp presses the number 1, the rest of the numbers are hidden. He has to remember where the numbers were and press the white squares in numerical order. The positioning of the numbers is totally random. He gets it right time after time, with lightning speed and 100% accuracy.
In 0.65 seconds, he can remember the numerals in which position.
Now it's your turn. Did you get them? No? Try again. This time we'll run the sequence at half speed. Still too difficult? Try at a quarter speed. Back to full speed, and you get an idea of how extraordinary this chimpanzee's memory is. So how do humans compare? No one knows why, but children tend to be better than adults at this sort of short-term memory task. We've asked some 9-year-olds to have a go. They take a lot longer studying the numbers before they start. And even then, most of the time, they only get 4 or 5 right. Occasionally, they do a little better. Not bad, but now watch the chimpanzee again. It seems that chimp short-term memory is superior to ours.
And another cognitive ability we look for in animals is this ability of self-awareness, and this may well exist in all animals, but to be able to actually show it from a scientific point of view, then we use something called the mirror test. So self-awareness is to be aware that you as an individual are separate to the environment and separate to other individuals within the environment. And to be able to demonstrate this, then we use the mirror test, the mirror mark test, where a mark is put on an animal which it can't actually see itself until it looks in the mirror, and to see whether it actually to see whether it then investigates that mark once it sees itself in the mirror, or whether by looking in the mirror it simply thinks it's looking at another either elephant or chimpanzee or dog, or whatever case the species may be. Now, it must be said that this is not a foolproof system using this test, because many individuals, their main senses aren't visual, so therefore it's difficult for them to use this kind of visual sensation to say whether they are or not self-aware. And also it helps if you have an appendage such as a trunk or arms and hands where you can actually move around and touch things. But in this case, it's obviously been demonstrated in elephants, and there's a video to explain this a little bit more. So there it is in elephants. We can also see, again, going back to the farmed animals, then pigs also understand these properties of mirrors and understand this visual spatial concept that mirrors operate within. And in this case, you can see this is where a bowl of food is presented to pigs, but it's actually a reflection that they're initially seeing, and they have to work out exactly how to get to that food using the properties of the mirror. And this is explained by Professor Donald Broom in this video. And this then leads us to this idea, which was mentioned in the elephant video, of theory of mind. And this is the ability to be able to attribute mental states to other individuals. So to know that other individuals are maybe have information that you don't have other beliefs that you don't have, and to understand that the world is not just how you see it, but actually other individuals may actually have information or see the world differently. And this theory of mind idea then is very much associated with this self-awareness and being able to understand how others are seeing the world. And once again, coming back to pigs, then we can see that in this case, then pigs do have a very deep understanding of each other, and have this understanding that other pigs may have information that they don't have. And in a particular experiment which was done, which was a foraging experiment in a field, where two pigs were paired together, and one of them was a smaller pig and one was a larger pig. The smaller pig was allowed to see a person putting food in various places within a field, so it knew where the food was going to be. The larger pig didn't see this process of food being put into the field. So then the two pigs are released together into the field, and of course the smaller pig would instantly go to where the food was because it remembered where the food was being placed, whereas the larger pig would often at the start would just search around randomly within the field looking for the food. It had no idea. Now gradually over time, as you do this, the larger pig begins to realize that his friend, the smaller pig, actually knows where the food is because he's going to it every time. So then he starts to follow this pig. So therefore he has an understanding that his friend, the other pig, has information that he doesn't have, and therefore he follows that pig to that point. Interestingly, what actually happened within this experiment was then, because there were various piles of food, the smaller pigs would often start to go towards the smaller piles of food. Now, this was because once the larger pig came to that food, it would often outcompete it, and therefore the smaller pig wouldn't be able to access that food source. So the smaller pig was now being deceptive, and it was actually taking the larger pig to the smaller pile of food, and once they got there, he would then leave and go to a larger pile of food, again using that cognitive ability to his own advantage. But ultimately this shows that animals understand each other. They have this, they can understand what another animal knows and is thinking, and therefore, and sometimes use that for their own benefit as well. And so really to conclude with this presentation, then I think what we found is that animals are way more complex than we initially thought. And this new understanding of animals really started back in the 1960s with the likes of Dr. Jane Goodall in her studies with chimpanzees, when she immersed herself into the field, working with wild chimpanzees, and she started to understand that actually they showed a lot of the characteristics which we knew existed within ourselves. And now this research continues both in the wild, but also in behavioral research situations, and is now being demonstrated in a whole range of individuals, not just in the individuals which are similar to ourselves, but also in the farmed animals, but also in fishes and in the birds, and also now, as we say, in invertebrates. And so animals have very complex emotional capabilities, both emotions which are positive, but also emotions which are going to be negative, but also have these incredible cognitive abilities. And this, of course, has deep implications to how we as a society actually treat those individuals, knowing now that they live these very complex lives. So that's it from me. Thank you very much for listening to this presentation. I hope that it's been useful. I hope that it's given you food for thought about the abilities of animals, and you can be able to look at animals differently and not just look at some of the charismatic animals like the elephants and chimpanzees and dolphins as being cognitively complex and emotionally complex, but also those animals such as the pigs and the hens and the cows and the fishes and the invertebrates which we share our world with, as also having these emotional and cognitive capabilities as well. Thank you very much.
Ok, vậy là chúng ta đã vừa kết thúc cái bài chia sẻ của anh Dave, và bây giờ chúng ta sẽ chuyển qua mục trả lời câu hỏi nhé. Nếu như mà các bạn có những cái câu hỏi gì thì các bạn có thể để lại trong phần hộp chat, hoặc là các bạn sử dụng chức năng raise hand để mình sẽ mở mic cho các bạn nói nhé. Đấy là một buổi chia sẻ với rất là nhiều những kiến thức, cũng như là rất là nhiều những cái video chứng minh về khả năng nhận thức và cảm xúc của động vật. Nên là rất mong là chúng mình sẽ có thể nhận được nhiều câu hỏi của các bạn. Các bạn hãy hỏi thật nhiều đến diễn giả của chúng ta ngày hôm nay nhé. Và để các đợi mình một chút nhé. Rồi, thì bây giờ trong lúc chờ đợi các bạn thì chúng ta có một số những cái câu hỏi mà một số các bạn đã gửi đến form của chương trình trước, nên là mình sẽ hỏi một số câu hỏi đấy đầu tiên nhé. Anh Thanh giúp em trả lời câu hỏi này của anh Dave nha. Em sẽ gửi câu hỏi này ở đây. So hi Dave, so we're gonna move to the Q&A section.
Hi Hung, hi everybody.
Okay.
Vâng, anh đợi em một chút, em sẽ gửi câu hỏi lên đây.
Yeah. The first question from audience is Dave, that are there any difference about the cognition of two species or individuals in one species?
Yes, there are. I think there are differences in all of us in terms of our cognitive abilities. So there are certainly differences between species in terms of what their cognitive abilities are, and their cognitive abilities will really be dependent upon the environment which they live in. So depending on just how complex that environment is, to just how much problem solving they need to do, or how much memory capacity they need. But also individuals within the species will also differ, just like ourselves. You know, some of us will be good at certain tasks and others won't be. It just depends on individual personalities to whether you're good at problem solving or good at memorizing things, etc.
Trả lời cho câu hỏi của bạn, có ý kiến là có sự khác biệt về cái khả năng giữa các loài với nhau, nó tùy thuộc vào cái năng nhận thức này, nó tùy thuộc vào cái khả năng của mỗi loài, nó có thể được xử lý được những cái tác vụ khác nhau trong cái môi trường sống của nó. Và trong cùng một loài thì mỗi cá thể cũng có những cái năng lực để giải quyết cái vấn đề khác nhau, và nó ví dụ như là có cái trí nhớ khác nhau, rồi có cái khả năng giải quyết một vấn đề, nó có sự nhanh chậm hay là có sự khác biệt giữa với nhau rồi. Right, to the second question, do all animals from higher to lower animals have to lower, I mean like the levels, have cognition? Is it fair to protect one species because it has more cognition, or it has higher cognition capacity or emotion than the other ones?
That's a very good question. I think, again, looking at the same answer in terms of animals having very different cognitive levels, I think sometimes we can confuse our understanding of cognition with intelligence, and then try to say that certain animals need to be better protected because they're more intelligent, when actually that's not the case. Animals have cognitive abilities which allow them to live in the environment that they've evolved to live within. Now, it's sometimes difficult for us to understand that because we don't live in those environments. But for those animals, then there are very complex cognitive abilities to allow them to find food or to problem solve within their particular environment. But they may not seem very cognitive to us because we're doing what we see as far more advanced things within our society.
Cái câu hỏi của bạn, bạn hỏi khi mà có cái sự động vật bậc cao bậc thấp thì có nhận thức hay không, và thông thường người con người chúng ta thường là thường nhầm lẫn hai khái niệm là khả năng nhận thức và cái trí thông minh. Thì cái trí thông minh thì nó khác, trong khi cái khả năng nhận thức ở các cái loài động vật thì nó đều có cái khả năng nhận thức để trong giải quyết những vấn đề trong cái môi trường của nó, còn cái trí thông minh thì nó khác. Và chúng ta thường dựa vào những cái khả năng nhận thức của động vật đấy, và nhầm với trí thông minh và quyết định rằng, lựa chọn rằng là cái loài động vật này nó thông minh thì nên đáng được bảo vệ hơn những cái loài khác. Do đó thì đây là một cái điều mà cần phải xem xét rõ ràng lại.
We generally see a lot more or cognitive ability and emotions within social animals. And this is because they need, just like ourselves, we need to be able to interact with each other, and to do that, then we need to be able to problem solve and memorize our interactions, but also express our emotions to other individuals as well, both positive and negative emotions. So we often look for these things in some of the social animals, which is probably why we know a lot more about cognitive abilities and emotions for animals like elephants and primates and cetaceans and crows, things like that.
Ở các cái loài động vật nó có cái tập tính sống quần thể, sống theo bầy đàn ấy, thì nó cũng có cái khả năng nhận thức nó rõ ràng hơn, và tại vì những cái động vật đó chúng tương tác nhiều hơn, thể hiện những cái khả năng cảm xúc cực hơn.
But we should be careful. Sorry.
Sẽ thường chú ý tới các loài ví dụ như là gà hay là heo hay là voi thế nào. Okay, go on, Dave. Sorry.
We should be careful not to say that other animals don't have cognitive abilities or don't have emotions just because we haven't discovered them yet. So in some of the animals, particularly in the invertebrates, in some of the animals like the fishes, where they just haven't been studied very well in comparison to some of the mammals in particular, we do have to be careful that we don't come to a conclusion that because there's no evidence that they experienced emotions or evidence of experience in advanced sort of cognitive abilities, that they don't exist. It's just maybe that we haven't looked for them, or we haven't tried to understand their world as we have understood the world of maybe elephants and chimpanzees.
Tuy nhiên là chúng ta cũng nên thận trọng khi mà đưa tới những cái kết luận như là các cái loài động vật khác, như ví dụ như là các loài giáp xác hoặc các cái động vật có vú nhưng mà sống độc lập, hoặc sống tách biệt, nó không có sống quần thể, và kết luận rằng những loài đó không có khả năng nhận thức cao hay là không có khả năng biểu hiện cảm xúc. Tại vì thực tế là có thể chúng ta chưa tìm hiểu các cái loài đó đủ nhiều và đủ sâu để có thể đưa ra những cái kết luận đó. So với những cái loài mà chúng ta đã dành nhiều thời gian và các cái nghiên cứu, giống như cái loài voi hay loài tinh tinh, và do đó thì chưa thể có đủ cái dữ liệu để có kết luận. Hoặc ngoài những loài đó ra còn rất nhiều cái loài động vật khác mà con người chưa dành cái thời gian để nghiên cứu và chăm sóc và theo dõi, quan sát, để và do đó nó không nên vội kết luận những cái loài khác nó không có khả năng đó.
And then the second part of that question, is it fair to protect one species due to its cognitive or emotional abilities? Then no, I don't think we should use cognition or emotion or the recognition of those abilities as something that we should then decide upon whether an animal deserves protection or not. I think we should be protecting all species as much as we possibly can and their habitats, regardless of whether we see them as being emotionally complex or cognitively complex. I think every species it deserves our respect and our protection for that species as it is, rather than just because we know that it's more, it appears to have more of these cognitive and emotional abilities.
Và ở phần câu hỏi thứ hai của bạn là liệu chúng ta có nên bảo vệ các cái loài khác nhau dựa trên cái khả năng nhận thức hay khả năng tri giác của động vật đó, thì theo chúng tôi thì chúng ta không nên dựa vào một cái quan điểm, một cái góc nhìn là dựa trên cái khả năng nhận thức hay khả năng thể hiện cảm xúc của động vật để đưa ra cái quyết định có bảo vệ cái loài đó hơn các loài khác hay không. Chúng ta trong cái khả năng của mình thì nên cố gắng là bảo vệ tất cả các cái loài động vật và cố gắng tôn trọng các cái thế giới tự nhiên động vật. Một loài đó giống như là một cái loài đặc trưng trong một tổng hợp các cái giống loài mà sinh vật sống trên trái đất này.
I think one of the things that we could look at is whether animals are sentient or not, so whether they have the capacity to experience pain, fear, and also to experience positive emotions like happiness and joy. And we should use that as a mark to how we then treat those animals. Now, that doesn't come too much in terms of protection in the wild, but it does then call into question the practices that we do to animals, whether that be using for animals for food, or whether that be in laboratories or for entertainment. If those animals are sentient animals, which we know that all of the mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, the fish are all sentient, but we're now also seeing that many of the invertebrate species are sentient as well. That is something that we need to use as a mark to then how we protect those individuals and those species within our laws.
Và một điều mà chúng tôi cũng muốn mọi người lưu ý tới là cái khả năng tri giác của các loài động vật. Khả năng tri giác đó là cái khả năng mà các loài động vật có thể cảm thụ được đau đớn, có thể trải nghiệm được những cái yếu tố tích cực hay tiêu cực trong cái môi trường sinh sống của nó. Và hiện tại thì cho tới thời điểm này thì cũng đã có rất nhiều những cái nghiên cứu mà chứng minh rằng cái khả năng tri giác có ở các loài như là các cái loài giáp xác như là tôm hùm hay là cua chẳng hạn, và có ở rất nhiều các cái loài động vật khác. Và dựa trên cái khả năng tri giác này thì chúng ta có thể đưa ra nhìn nhận rằng động vật nó cũng có những cái trải nghiệm tương tự như con người vậy, và đáng để tránh khỏi những cái đối xử mà gây đau đớn hay là khả năng căng thẳng chịu đựng cho động vật. Okay, we have one question in the chat box. The person just sent me direct question. So the question is, why humans should not kill an animal in front of its friends, or in front of the same animal from the same species, in front of a
Why we should, well, yeah, okay. I guess this is referring to slaughterhouses and animals in the way that they're treated in slaughterhouses. I think we've come to understand that animals have a perception of what is happening to them. So animals which are going through a slaughter process will understand and be able to sense the fear that other animals are going through as they go to be slaughtered. And so the general way now of trying to reduce the fear and the stress in animals which we are slaughtering for our food is to try to block what experiences they see as they go towards the final slaughter, which means that most animals shouldn't be physically viewing another animal being killed. Now, that is, it certainly improves that experience for those animals, so they're less fearful when they actually get to that final point of slaughter, but they will still be experiencing a stress situation, because it's completely all those animals which are in that situation will of course be experiencing stress, and that will be passed on to all of them. But ultimately, hopefully, they're not actually seeing that final animal being killed, which they will be able to understand, because they will understand what is happening to that other animal is about to happen to them.
Câu hỏi của bạn là tại sao lại không nên giết một động vật trước mặt đồng loại của chúng, thì có lẽ là bạn hoặc là đang hỏi về cái việc giết thịt động vật trong các cái lò mổ, hoặc là trong các cái hoạt động giết thịt hàng ngày ấy. Thì một trong những cái lý do mà các quy định pháp luật hay là những cái đề xuất ấy là không nên giết hại động vật trước cái sinh vật khác đồng loại ấy, thì do cái khả năng nhận thức của động vật khi mà chúng ở trong những cái hoàn cảnh và trong cái giây phút cuối đời là động vật có thể biết được, và động vật trải qua cái sự sợ hãi và căng thẳng, và khi nó bị giết thịt, và những cái sinh vật mà trong cùng cái môi trường đó thì chứng kiến cái cảnh là một cái con vật đồng loại bị giết đó, thì nó có khả năng cảm thụ được, và nó có hiểu được cái vấn đề gì đang diễn ra xung quanh, và có sợ hãi và căng thẳng, và gì nó sẽ xảy ra đến đó. Và sau đó là cái khuyến nghị hay là đã được đưa vào trong cái quy định không được giết hại động vật trước mặt đồng loại của nó.
So from a pure animal welfare point of view, then we should be trying.
Sorry, go on, Dave.
We should be trying to reduce the amount of stress and fear for those individual animals throughout their whole process of production, particularly for farm animals. And so that is one of the things. Not allowing them to see other animals being killed is actually part of trying to protect their individual welfare.
Và đối với các động vật chăn nuôi mà chúng ta sản xuất để làm thực phẩm cho con người, thì trong mọi quá trình thì quá trình sản xuất thì chúng ta đều cố gắng là cải thiện cái phúc lợi động vật và đặt cái phúc lợi được cao nhất ấy. Thì đối với cái bước giết mổ này thì chính là giảm cái sự sợ hãi và căng thẳng và đau đớn cho động vật ấy. Okay. We have Huỳnh Trần Huy has his hand raised. Yeah, I'll ask him to open his mic.
Yes.
Mời bạn Huy mở mic lại.
Yes. Hello there and hello everybody. Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah. Hi.
Yeah. Yeah. I have two questions for you about the subject. In your opinion, what's the of the keeping animal in captivity, especially in the zoo, affects the animal emotion and cognition. Sometimes I go to the zoo, I can see some animal is very excited to interact with the visitor, but some animal is timid and scared when they see the visitor. Yes.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think if we are going to keep animals in captivity, then we need to be aware of their cognitive and their emotional capacities of those particular species. And then we need to be able to provide them with an environment which helps them to carry out those cognitive capacities and experience the positive emotions. And I think that's where at the moment many zoos around the world don't have that understanding, so they're keeping animals in very inappropriate conditions, which then are very stressful for those animals. And I think a better understanding of these cognitive abilities in particular of animals would actually from within the zoo community, people which are actually managing these animals, would really help in terms of changing the way that they look after those animals to make sure that those animals are much happier. And that would be a better experience for the animal, but it would also be a much better experience for the individuals that visited those zoos as well.
Yes.
Một câu hỏi của bạn Huy là về cái việc nuôi nhốt động vật ở trong cái vườn thú. Bông ơi, trong các vườn thú thì nó ảnh hưởng cái khả năng nhận thức hay cái khả năng biết về cái khả năng nhận thức hay khả năng cảm xúc của vật này nó có tác động như thế nào, hoặc là cái vườn thú hiện tại đang nuôi nhốt động vật trong cái môi trường không phù hợp và nhỏ hẹp. Thì anh Dave có trả lời rằng là cái điều quan trọng là cái hiện tại các vườn thú mô hình của họ là đang trưng bày động vật trong cái chuồng nhỏ để mà khách tham quan có thể tới quan sát động vật, và họ thường những cái môi trường đó nó chật hẹp và nó khiến cho động vật phải trải qua những cái căng thẳng và cái khó chịu. Thì để giải quyết cái vấn đề này thì các cơ quan quản lý của nhân viên quản lý vườn thú, nhân viên chăm sóc động vật ở vườn thú cần phải được trang bị thêm kiến thức về khả năng nhận thức, khả năng cảm xúc của động vật, thì để có thể cung cấp thay đổi những cái điều kiện đó để động vật có thể có cuộc sống nó bớt phải chịu đựng, bớt phải căng thẳng hơn.
Yeah. The second question of me is, can you tell me the difference between about the emotion between two groups of animals? Group one is the solitary animal like the cheetah, the tiger, and the group two of animal is the herd animal. Because I see the solitary animal, they play alone and they spend their time to earn food every day, and they very little interact with their all kind of the animal when they play. Yes.
Yeah, I think I understand that the difference between sort of animals which are more social and then those which are solitary in terms of their emotions. Yeah, it's a difficult one because I think emotions are something which you often see expressed, and it's unlikely that solitary animals express those emotions quite as much when they're on their own. It doesn't mean to say that they're not experiencing those emotions. It may well be. I think we see it more in social animals because they can express it towards other individuals. So therefore, it's often very, very more evident. But it doesn't mean to say it doesn't exist. And a lot of animals that we call solitary are not always as solitary as we sort of make out. I mean, tigers are often seen as being solitary animals, but tiger mothers have cubs every year, and then will spend 3-4 months with those cubs, and that bond between them and their cubs, and this will be the same with cheetahs as well, you mentioned, is very, very strong. And you can see there's an emotional bond between the mother and the cubs whilst the cubs are young. She will protect them, she will make sure that they have all the needs, and she will then teach them how to hunt and how to learn to live within their environment. And so there's certainly an emotional connection with these animals, which we see as more solitary. And there's also a connection sometimes with other individuals of the same species within their environment. Even though they might not spend a lot of time together, they may still come together. Either obviously males and females come together for mating, but also, females that are previous cubs of the mother, they may well interact with each other positively within their environment, even though they don't spend time together on a long-term basis. So I think it is the emotional, solitary animals still have emotional experiences similar to social animals. It's just that we don't see them quite as much as we do maybe in some of the animals which are always together.
Câu hỏi thứ hai của bạn Huỳnh Trần Huy là cái sự khác biệt về cái khả năng hoặc cái biểu hiện cảm xúc giữa các loài động vật sống đơn lẻ và các loài sống theo quần thể, sống bầy đàn. Thì thực tế thì các cái loài sống đơn lẻ như ví dụ như bạn đưa ra là hổ hay báo chẳng hạn, thì nó thường có cái xu hướng là không sống riêng lẻ và không sống thành một cái nhóm bầy đàn lớn. Tuy nhiên là những cái cá thể này, và như vậy thì các cá thể này có ít cái cơ hội là ít cái tình trạng tác hoặc là với các cái cá thể đồng loại khác và thể hiện những cái cảm xúc so với các cái loài sống bầy đàn. Tuy nhiên là điều này không có nghĩa rằng là các cái loài này cũng không có biểu hiện nhiều cảm xúc. Vì thực tế ví dụ như là cái hổ cái chẳng hạn, thì khi mỗi năm thì nó có một cái cái mùa sinh sản, và hổ cái khi một quá trình mà chăm sóc con thì nó cũng thể hiện cái tình mẫu tử, thể hiện cái sự chăm con cái, rồi dạy cho con những cái kỹ năng sinh tồn chẳng hạn, và thể hiện sự thương yêu con của mình. Thì đây là những cái dấu hiệu thể hiện cái khả năng tình cảm, cái cảm xúc của động vật. Hoặc là trong cùng một cái môi trường, các cùng một loài nhưng mà các cái cá thể khác nhau, cá thể non hoặc khi mà gặp nhau thì chúng cũng có những cái tương tác. Ví dụ như là khi hai cá thể cái mà gặp nhau thì, và nhất là khi mà một cá thể cái đang nuôi một đàn con nhỏ chẳng hạn, thì sẽ có những cái tương tác tích cực giữa cái cá thể cái trưởng thành kia với các cái cá thể khác trong cùng một nhóm đó. Đối với các cái để như vậy có thể cho thấy là mặc dù là cũng không có nhiều cái tương tác như chúng ta quan sát thấy ở các cái loài mà sống bầy đàn, sống quần thể, nhưng cũng có những cái cá thể, những cái loài mà sống riêng lẻ đó cũng có những cái biểu hiện cái khả năng cảm xúc, cũng có những cảm xúc trong những cái tình huống.
Yes, the human, when we live alone or play alone, we will feel very boring and very depressed. And the animals like us.
I think when animals are in captivity, they will feel very bored and depressed. When they're in a very sterile environment where they're being provided with any kind of enrichment, then certainly animals will, and particularly more so the solitary animals, but also social animals which are being kept alone as well will have an even more difficult experience, because they don't even have that social interaction. But I think wild animals which are solitary won't feel the same, just because there's so much for them to do in their own environment, in a wild environment. If nothing else, just in terms of protecting themselves from danger. Wild environment is very dangerous for animals, obviously. There's always a predator. There's always something which is trying to catch and kill you or take over your territory. And so therefore I don't think the wild animals will experience the boredom as much as maybe we do when we feel like we don't have anything to do.
Và bạn có hỏi là những cái động vật mà nuôi nhốt và trong cái điều kiện mà môi trường nó trống trơn, không có nhiều cái tương tác, thì nó có bị buồn chán hay không. Thì dĩ nhiên là cũng giống như con người thôi, khi mà trong một cái môi trường mà nó sạch sẽ và nó không có hoàn toàn những cái yếu tố tương tác nào, gọi là trống trơn, thì nó rất là nhàm chán. Và các cái loài động vật cũng tương tự như vậy. Và điều này thì nó đúng với cả động vật sống riêng lẻ lẫn động vật mà sống theo quần thể, và đặc biệt đối với những cái động vật mà sống quần thể khi mà bị nhốt riêng lẻ với nhau mà không được tương tác với các đồng loại, thì cái sự nhàm chán hay cái sự căng thẳng này nó còn tệ hơn, bởi vì nó là một cái yêu cầu mang tính hành vi của loài đó nữa. Và ở ngoài tự nhiên thì môi trường nó cũng không phải là nó rất là đa dạng, đúng không? Và nó so với con người thì nó không có những cái tương tác như chúng ta, và nó có những cái đặc trưng riêng. Và túm lại là khi các cái loài động vật khi được nuôi nhốt trong cái điều kiện do con người quản lý mà nó trống trơ, thì nó là một cái yếu tố rất là có tác động tiêu cực tới cái hành vi cũng như là cái sự gây ra những cái căng thẳng cho động vật.
Yes, okay. Thank you so much for your answering my question. Yes, thank you.
Thank you for the questions.
Okay. Nếu bạn có câu hỏi thêm, các bạn có thể đặt thêm phần chat box hoặc là mở mic để trao đổi tiếp ạ. Yeah, I have one question, like for you, Dave. Like knowing that animals or many species, not to say like most, and the more we research and observe animals, the more we find out that they have emotion and they have and explore their cognition capacity. So what is the takeaway message here from your audience? Knowing like capacity in animals.
Yeah, and it's a very good one. I think we just have to take it into consideration in everything that we do. So if we, particularly obviously in our food choices, we need to take into consideration the impact that our choices are having on those particular animals. And I think once we understand that those animals are much more complex than we previously thought, we don't really have to know too much about just how complex their cognitive abilities are or just how complex their emotional abilities are. We just need to know that they exist within these animals, and animals have these abilities. And then we need to look at, and we need to say, well, how can I try to improve those lives of those animals, or at least try to prevent those animals from having a poor quality of life. And I think things like obviously our choices for food have a big impact, because most of our food comes from intensively farmed animals. So then it really comes down to, as individuals, whether we either want to say, well, we don't want to be eating any animals at all, or maybe we just want to ensure that animals have a good life before they are slaughtered. So that then becomes an individual choice. But I think we do need to take all this into consideration, and particularly like things like the use of animals in zoos or in entertainment. We need to again look and say, how will these animals want to live their life if they had free choice? And are they experiencing that? And if they're not, I don't want to really partake in the suffering for those particular animals.
Thank you. That's very, very helpful. Mình vừa đặt cho anh Dave một cái câu hỏi là khi mà chúng ta biết được rằng là các loài động vật có cái khả năng nhận thức cũng như khả năng cảm xúc như vậy, thì và ngày càng, nếu mà chúng ta ngày càng nghiên cứu, ngày càng có những cái quan sát, thì cái số lượng các loài động vật mà chúng ta thấy rằng nó có những khả năng tri giác này nó ngày càng mở rộng thêm, thì cái thông điệp hoặc là chúng ta rút ra được cái điều gì từ những cái nghiên cứu hay những cái kết quả đó. Thì anh ấy có trả lời rằng là khi mà chúng ta biết được những cái điều này thì nó có thể ảnh hưởng tới nó giúp chúng ta đưa ra được những cái quyết định nó phù hợp với cái quan điểm cũng như là cái nhận thức của mình hơn. Khi mà nhất là các cái loài động vật mà hiện tại mà chúng ta tương tác hàng ngày, ví dụ như là những cái loài động vật mà chúng ta sử dụng làm thực phẩm, thì chúng ta có thể biết rằng là hầu hết hoặc một cái số lượng lớn các thực phẩm mà chúng ta tiêu thụ hàng ngày thì đến từ các cái trang trại mà nuôi nhốt trong cái điều kiện quy mô công nghiệp, quy mô rất là lớn, chật chội. những hành động của chúng ta thì có thể làm được gì để cải thiện cái việc đó, ví dụ như là có thể là không ăn thịt động vật, hay là giảm cái số lượng thịt chúng ta tiêu thụ hàng ngày, hoặc là chúng ta thấy tới thăm một cái vườn thú và thấy những cái động vật nuôi nhốt trong điều kiện đó, thì chúng ta có thể đặt ra cái câu hỏi là nếu mà những động vật này sống ở tự nhiên hay có cái quyền lựa chọn thì nó sẽ lựa chọn như thế nào, những động vật đó có đang hạnh phúc hay không, thì và nếu không hạnh phúc thì cái lựa chọn như thế nào là tốt hơn cho chúng, hoặc là chúng ta có nên tiếp tục ủng hộ những cái cơ sở mà chăn nuôi động vật, nuôi nhốt động vật ở trong cái điều kiện mà nó khiến động vật nó không được vui vẻ thoải mái hay phải chịu đựng căng thẳng đó hay không. Thì đây là những cái điều mà chúng ta có thể hiểu thêm, và không cần phải có cái nhiều kiến thức quá, hay là cần phải hiểu rõ ràng rằng là một cái loài cụ thể này thì nó có khả năng như nào, có khả năng biểu hiện cảm xúc đến đâu, nhưng mà chúng ta đều hiểu rằng là các loài đó hiện cũng đang biết được cái môi trường của nó tương tác trong cái hoàn cảnh như thế nào, và có khả năng nhận thức được cái thế giới xung quanh nó.
Có một câu hỏi nữa mà em đã viết vào phần group
We
chat rồi
have
đấy ạ.
one more question here. There's a case about bonobo adopted infants from other group. It is evidence to prove that animals also have emotion like human. So, in your opinion, is this a behavior that is beyond a normal emotion because it presents in animals that have humanity as well, like except bonobo? Are there any, and the second question is, are there any other species that adopt infants that you know, that you're aware of?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think I'm not really sure we'd say it's beyond the normal emotion. It is an emotion. It's an emotional response, similar to what we see in humans, as in, there is an understanding there from these bonobos that this individual needed protection, and if somebody didn't step in and do that, then the individual would likely die. And so it's an emotional response by the bonobo to take on that individual, and it's not always seen because yes, it means that individuals likely to be outside of their normal social group. It's part of a different community, and so therefore maybe doesn't have the same genetics as that community. So it's something which if we look at it very biologically, we say, well, animals really just want to be able to pass on their genetics, so therefore they'll only really protect animals that have similar genes to them. But actually, we see now that isn't true. That isn't true within our own way of working, and we're now seeing that in bonobos as well. In terms of whether this is something seen in other animals, there's not a huge amount of documented evidence of adoption within animals. I know it has been. I've heard of it in chimpanzees, also in gorillas. I think there's evidence in elephants as well. But I have heard of evidence of it in squirrels, which that's something which I read quite recently, where individual squirrels, if a mother has died, but they have young, then other squirrels will sometimes raise those young. So I think it's something which probably needs to be looked into a lot more. You'll probably find it does happen more than we are aware of. I just think we haven't looked into it very much as a sort of society.
Yeah, and I can add, like, in our daily life, in my life, I also witnessed like dog and cats, like they adopt like kittens, for example, dog, mother dog, or in one of the zoo, Dynam Zoo, years ago when we visited, we saw like a dog in the tiger cage, and the keeper said like the other dog like breastfed the tiger cub. So but it should not be promoted, but it's happened. Câu hỏi của bạn trong phần như các bạn cũng có thấy trong phần chat là bạn ấy có thấy ở cái loài tinh tinh lùn nhận nuôi con non, và điều này là một hành vi vượt khỏi cảm xúc, và thì và nó thể hiện cái tính nhân văn. Ngoài tinh tinh có trường hợp nào khác không? Thực ra thì cái phản ứng đó của cái loài động vật nó là một cái phản ứng bình thường về mặt cảm xúc, khi mà trong cái bối cảnh đó nên cái con tinh tinh, một cái thể tinh tinh trưởng thành nhận ra rằng là nếu mà không có cá thể nào trong đàn đó chấp nhận cái cá thể tinh tinh non đó, thì cá thể đó có khả năng sẽ không thể sinh tồn được, và do nó đưa ra một cái quyết định, và nó rất bình thường về mặt cảm xúc thôi. Khi đứng trước cái hoàn cảnh đó thì con người, cái động vật mà có cảm xúc khác thì cũng sẽ đưa ra những cái quyết định tương tự. Thì ở đây nó chỉ có một cái sự gọi là bất thường khi là không có nhiều cái trường hợp thường diễn ra khi cái cá thể tinh tinh non kia từ một cái đàn khác mà ngẫu nhiên lọt vào trong cái môi trường đó, hoặc là khi trong cái hoàn cảnh nó đặc biệt như vậy thôi. Còn lại thì cái khả năng thể hiện cảm xúc, đây là một cái phản ứng bình thường về mặt cảm xúc. Và phần thứ hai là bạn thấy ngoài những cái trường hợp tinh tinh thì có những trường hợp nào khác, thì cũng chưa có nhiều nghiên cứu nó được báo cáo viết thành và tài liệu xuất bản về những cái trường hợp này. Tuy nhiên là gần đây thì anh Dave cũng có đọc được một số các loài giống như là voi, rồi là gorilla, rồi thậm chí là một cái báo cáo gần đây nhất mà tài liệu gần đây nhất mà anh đọc được thì ở cả cái loài sóc nữa, khi con trưởng thành nó tiếp nhận một cái cá thể của con non khác, nó thể hiện rằng là ngoài chúng ta thường nghĩ rằng là cái việc chăm sóc con non thì nó thể hiện mạnh mẽ nhất khi mà chúng ta chăm sóc, duy trì cái giống loài, chính cái giống loài của mình, duy trì cái nguồn gen của mình bằng cách là chăm sóc cái con non do mình đẻ ra. Nhưng mà đây nó vượt qua những cái khả năng tri giác đó, và nhận thấy cái hoàn cảnh bị cái hoàn cảnh rất là khắc nghiệt, hay hoàn cảnh không phù hợp hoặc không tốt nhất đối với một con non khác, thì những cái con trưởng thành họ sẵn sàng tiếp nhận chăm nuôi cái con non đó. Thì nó cũng thể hiện cái khả năng tri giác của các cái khả năng nhận thức của các cái loài động vật. Và ngoài những cái loài nêu trên nữa thì cá nhân tôi cũng có chứng kiến những cái trường hợp là chó con nuôi mèo, chó mẹ nuôi mèo con chẳng hạn, hoặc là những cái loài động vật khác, loài khác mà nó thậm chí là nhận những cái con non, nuôi những cái con non khác loài, không phải đồng loại của nó. Đây là trước kia ở một cái vườn thú chúng tôi ghé thăm thì thấy rất là bất ngờ khi thấy trong chuồng cọp mà lại có một cái con chó rất là lớn, và khi hỏi ra thì người ta, nhân viên đó nói là hồi nhỏ người ta cho cái con cọp con bú sữa con chó đó, và nó phát triển thành khi mà cả hai lớn thì nó vẫn có thể sống hòa hợp với nhau. Dĩ nhiên đây không phải là một cái mô hình mà chúng tôi muốn khuyến khích hay là thấy là mọi người nên làm như vậy, nhưng mà đây có thể cho thấy cái khả năng cảm xúc, hay là cái như bạn nói là nó không phải là một cái điều gì bất thường. Okay. Right, we have another question. A lot of wild animals are being kept or trained in captivity, then showed fear of human and show other abnormal behavior. It is also evidence about animal emotion and cognition. So can human cure these psychological disorder in animals? And do animals be self-aware of their problem? Do they heal themselves, or let their friend or family help them?
That's a very good question. So we can help animals to recover from the situations where they've been treated very poorly. It really does depend on the individual animal and just how much suffering those animals have experienced. Animals, once they're experiencing a very poor environment where they're very fearful over long periods of time, will actually kind of shut down. They experience this, where they feel there's nothing that they can do to actually really change that situation. So they just kind of have to accept it. And it's very difficult to change those animals because they've gone so far. It's similar to people which have had very, very bad experiences, suffer psychologically and then it's very difficult to actually get them into a much more positive situation. But it really is down to the individual animal and their personality, to whether by removing them from that situation, putting them into a more positive situation actually changes them completely, or whether they still experience that negativity and that fear. And we often see in rescued animals that they still carry out a lot of these behaviors which we recognize as stereotypic behaviors, even when they've been removed from that negative situation. Are they aware of that? That's a really good question, and I don't know whether anybody's ever really looked into that. Are they actually aware themselves of the problems that they're experiencing? I would suggest that they are. I don't think there's any sort of scientific evidence to say that the animal has shown self-awareness in those situations, but I would suggest that they are very aware that they're experiencing those negative emotions. And in terms of healing, then yes, by putting those animals in more positive situations, then yes, it can help them, certainly. Again, the same with people, particularly social animals that have been kept in solitary confinement. So a social animal which has spent long periods of time alone and has also been in this fearful environment, by putting them into a group and interacting with others, then that can certainly help them to recover. But it really does come down to the individual and their personality to whether they fully recover or not.
Để trả lời câu hỏi của bạn với việc là rất nhiều động vật bị huấn luyện hay bị nuôi nhốt dẫn đến sợ hãi con người và có biểu hiện tâm lý khác thường, thì những động vật này liệu có thể chữa khỏi được cái bệnh tâm lý đó hay không, và hay những cái động vật đó có thể để có khả năng nhận thức được rằng cái tình trạng của mình cũng hay không, hay là có sẵn sàng để đồng loại giúp đỡ hay không. Thì đúng như bạn nói thì có động vật khi mà bị nuôi nhốt trong cái điều kiện tồi tệ, hay là bị sợ hãi căng thẳng, hay là bị nuôi nhốt tách khỏi đồng loại mình, nó có những cái biểu hiện tâm lý, và cái việc có thể chữa khỏi hay không thì nó tương tự như con người thôi, nó phụ thuộc vào từng cái cá thể. Ví dụ như ở một con người mà trải qua những cái giai đoạn mà bị chấn thương về mặt tâm lý thì nó khiến người đó phải có thể là rơi vào cái tình trạng là bất lực và gần như là buông xuôi ấy, thì không còn màng gì đến những cái thay đổi, những cái một yếu tố tích cực trong môi trường. Thì trong cái tình trạng đó thì thay đổi nó rất là khó để diễn ra. Tuy nhiên là chúng ta có thể chữa lành được những cái vết thương tâm lý đó ở động vật hay cũng như con người, nếu mà chúng ta chuyển những cái cá thể đó ra khỏi cái môi trường tiêu cực tại cái thời điểm đó và chuyển tới môi trường có những cái tương tác tích cực, và khiến cho cá thể đó có những cái trải nghiệm tích cực hơn. Và động vật có nhận thức được cái tình trạng của mình hay không thì nó là một cái câu hỏi rất là hay, và hiện tại thì chưa có nhiều những cái nghiên cứu người ta chú ý tới việc này. Nhưng mà cá nhân anh Dave thì anh cho rằng là động vật hoàn toàn có khả năng nhận thức được cái hoàn cảnh của mình, những cái môi trường, những cái điều diễn ra xung quanh, và nó nhận thức được cả cái tình trạng tâm lý của nó đang phải trải qua như thế nào. Về việc giúp đỡ thì nó, như anh đã nói, là nó tùy thuộc rất nhiều vào các cái cá thể, và những cái cá thể đó nếu được chuyển ra khỏi cái môi trường đang bị giam hãm hoặc có bị những cái hoàn cảnh bất lợi chẳng hạn, và chuyển tới những môi trường có những cái tương tác tích cực, hoặc là cái nhóm, đặc biệt những cái động vật mà bầy đàn mà bị nuôi nhốt riêng lẻ trong một thời gian quá lâu, khi được chuyển tới những cái nhóm đồng loại phù hợp, nó có những cái tương tác tích cực, thì có khả năng những cái cá thể đó nó sẽ được cải thiện tốt hơn. Tuy nhiên là trong những cái trung tâm cứu hộ thì có rất nhiều cái động vật mà trước kia bị những cái chấn thương tâm lý và cần phải một cái thời gian rất là dài mới có thể là cải thiện được những cái yếu tố này, mặc dù là cái môi trường, trong cái môi trường cứu hộ mới nó có những cái trải nghiệm tích cực.
Các bạn còn có câu hỏi nào không ạ? Nếu như có câu hỏi thì các bạn có thể giơ tay lên thì mình có thể mở mic cho các bạn nhé. Cái buổi video của buổi chia sẻ ngày hôm nay và cái câu trả lời câu hỏi thì mình sẽ gửi cho các bạn qua mail, thì các bạn có thể check mail sau vào tuần sau nhé. So thank you Dave for your presentation. I know that it's really early in the UK now, but you still take time to be here and share a lot of information with us. Thank you.
Thank you. You're very welcome. I've enjoyed it.
Vậy thì chúng ta sẽ kết thúc chia sẻ ngày hôm nay ở đây nhá. Mình rất là cảm ơn các bạn đã dành một buổi chiều cuối tuần để tham dự buổi chia sẻ kiến thức ngày hôm nay. Và những cái buổi chia sẻ tiếp theo thì mình sẽ tiếp tục update thông tin trên trang Facebook. Các bạn có thể theo dõi trên đấy nhá. Và cảm ơn các bạn.
Bye,
Thank you very much, Dave, and
Bye, Dave.
enjoy your holiday.
Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.
Cảm ơn Hương nhé.